Right, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the bottom line. On the bottom line, we say business at the speed of thought. Tonight, it will be business at the speed of thought. We are thinking about the economy of our country, Ghana. The need to go to IMF. We'll be taking you through the history of all of this, how all of this started, the promises that have been made by some politicians and so on and so forth, and everything around the IMF. What do you think about it? Should we go to the IMF or not? This is the bottom line, and this is the business segment or the business time of Metro TV, where you get to hear the business analysis of whatever thing that we talk about or we discuss. Tonight, we'll be going through the IMF program, whether Ghana should go or not. So you want to stick and stay with us and see some of the videos that we have for you tonight, and you will be able to run with us. You will share your thoughts with us as well. In the course of the discussions, we'll open up the phone lines, and I'll give you a WhatsApp line when I come back from this break. You want to send us your comments or concern on Ghana's bid at the IMF. Should we go or not? My name is Kwesi Afriye, and of course, tonight we are live on our channels 277 on DSTV. We are live from our studios here at Rage in Accra, and we are live on Facebook page, Chairman Kwesi Afriye. What are your comments? Put them up for us. We'll read them. Stick and stay with us. We'll be right back. Right, so you're welcome back from that break. I've told you earlier on that tonight our focus is on Ghana's program with the IMF. Should we actually go or we shouldn't? Negotiations are supposed to have begun with officials of the IMF, Ghana going to the IMF. And we have gone, I think, about 17 good times to the IMF to seek a bailout program. So if we go this time, well, the experts is here tonight to tell us whether it will be the 18th time if we actually sail through, and the conditionalities that are supposed to come with it and everything around the IMF. I want to leave the discussion for viewers today, and of course, our guests here in the studio tonight. So I'll be asking my questions, but I would allow lots of comments. If you have concerns, comments, you can put them on our WhatsApp numbers, which are scrolling on the screen. If you have any concern at all, kindly send them through our WhatsApp number on the screen. I would gladly read them and get answers, if possible. You can put your comments also up on our social media pages, Facebook page, and wherever you find us. You can tweet at me at Kwesi Afriye on Twitter, or even on Instagram, same name, Kwesi Afriye, and I'll surely read your comments. Let me introduce my guest to you tonight, and I'll go for some videos, after which I'll now come back into the studio for the discussion. And Emmanuel Amoah-Darkwa, well, he's been with us here. He's an economist and he's a partner at CCAT Global. We hope to get the best out of him tonight. He's been on these issues for quite a long time. And so you and I, if you're watching us from your home and I'm here, we hope to get the best out of him and learn a lot more about the program. Good evening, Emma. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me every year.
I hope you're doing very well.
I'm doing amazing. Yourself?
We are glad to have you tonight.
Great. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm sure I'll put to you my very first question, or the first two, before I go back for my video.
Yeah.
Did you anticipate that we'll get to a point where we'll have to go to IMF? And are we on course as a country?
Thank you for having me. At least in this current discussion, I would have expected that after the mid-year budget, then a decision will be made. And because personally, I don't have access to the figures as of now. It has to be in the presentation of the finance minister for us to look at the macroeconomic indicators. And more importantly, government had to put together some mitigation measures in March, how they are performing, so we can make an informed decision of going to the IMF for a bailout or stabilization program, as we call it. And I would have expected that we read the budget, but maybe they are privy to the figures and they think that this is the time for us to start engagement, because it can take some time for us to finally reach a negotiation with the fund for a stabilization program.
But without the figures, in the budget, we know where the debt to GDP ratio is hovering around currently. We know the inflation rates currently. We know the exchange rate currently. So most of the indicators are open to the public. We know the fuel prices, the hikes, and so on and so forth. So
but balance of payment, for example, which is the reason why we have indicated to engage with the fund. But it has 3 components, and so with the current account, with the financial account, and then the capital account, we would expect the state of that balance of payment for us to make an informed decision. But I know that maybe the managers of the economy have access to the current figures, and hence they've made a decision to start to engage with the fund.
So I'll come back to you for the 3 explanation of the 3 components first of all, after which we'll go into some of the practical decisions that have been taken to mitigate the economic hardships that we are in now and all the problems that are bound. But for now, let's go to some of the promises that had been made.
Okay.
Prior to now, it was an argument of we never going to the IMF. When even recently, in the recent past, when we had the issue of mobile money taxes and so on and so forth, we had those conversations. But let's watch these briefs. We'll come back to our discussions.
Okay.
But I'm not too sure why you think we are saying different things. What I'm saying is that government saw a situation, went to parliament. We have a parliament where it's not a situation where you could say the minority will have their say and government will have its way. We don't have such a parliament. And if you remember, on Monday, the minority leader was actually bragging, taking credit for frustrating government's attempt to raise money, delaying that by 6 months. Now, I'm not too sure how any government in Ghana's situation would have rescued it, because you have a major way of raising revenue, which has been frustrated for 6 months. Okay, so my point is, yes, there were challenges. Yes, government came with its policies to see how to address those challenges. And those policies were frustrated by the very parliament that we have. So yes, we are in a difficulty, but if you're a government, and even if you don't intend to go to the IMF, but you are put in a situation where your avenues of raising revenue are being closed, whether through parliamentary action or by public rejection, then you have to tackle it. And I believe that whatever you say, we are in the IMF, but when you look at the fact that the economy is still growing, when you look at the fact that beyond the challenges of servicing your debt, and that's what the relief that you get. I heard someone say that the IMF may not necessarily bring us money, but I think what it does is that it stops a run on your reserves, it stops a run on your bonds. And I think if we have that stability over the next 12 to 15 months, I believe that the country will see a turnaround. So I'm not too pessimistic about why we are in the IMF. It's unfortunate that we were forced there because the policies that the government brought did not get the support that it required.
In the end, we are talking about the Black Star shining again. A people who are proud, a people who are prosperous, a people who are well educated, a people who are ready to share and sacrifice so that all of us, our 30 million people, will move ahead. But I can tell you, as my colleague, Deputy Minister said, we are not going to the IMF. Whatever we do, we are not. The consequences are there. We are a proud nation. We have the resources. We have the capacity. Don't let anybody tell you. Like when Joshua, Caleb, and the 10 others went to spy on the promised land. And only 2 of them came to say that we can do it. And the 10 went around the community murmuring, you can't, We are not people of short.
Ghana and the IMF have been trending on various social media platforms following President Akufo-Addo's directive to the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to begin formal engagement with the International Monetary Fund for an economic support. In several conversations, government has been criticized for making a U-turn on seeking a bailout. In Parliament on Friday, there was a heated conversation on the floor. Deputy Majority Leader Alexander Afenyo-Markin says the erstwhile Mahama administration went to the IMF due to mismanagement, but the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia-led administration is headed for the IMF due to the global crisis.
When question time was ongoing, they interfered with this shout of IMF. You went to IMF when there was no crisis.
You are supposed to guide me. Rather, the leaders are supposed to guide me. Can you resume?
Mr. Speaker, we are the masters of our own rules. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of urgent public interest.
Well, there's time for urgent public business.
They should not be murmuring.
Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu thinks otherwise.
The deputy leader may have aspiration to be leader, but not aspiration to be minister for finance and to be making formal announcement on behalf of the Minister for Finance on IMF. Ghana will not go to IMF, unquote, says Ken Ofori-Atta. What are you seeking to do? To formally announce to this house that there is now a school prophet in the IMF.
Deputy Ranking Member on the Finance Committee, Isaac Adongo, said the government will begin negotiation from a place of vulnerability since it allowed many things to run around before seeking the help of the IMF.
Unfortunately, they are beginning to engage at a time that they are not even prepared to have anything on the table for the IMF to consider. You recall the Census Consensus provided a working document through which government could negotiate on a position from a position of strength because we knew what we wanted. These guys are going to IMF at a time they basically don't have anything, no blueprint. So chances are that we are going to have a lot of the program being designed from the perspective of the IMF and not the perspective of the country. But I want to make the point that they have already started on a faulty leg. Asking Ken Ofori-Atta to engage IMF is equivalent to telling the IMF we don't want a program.
Isaac Adongo, the Bolgatanga Central MP, says the woes of the economy are due to the wrong decisions taken by the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta and the Minister of State in charge of Finance at the Presidency, Charles Edubuahi. He says the two individuals must eat the humble pie.
One, Ken Ofori-Atta lacks the capacity and is not fit for this type of purpose. Ken Ofori-Atta should be fired immediately with that communique in order to give assurance and comfort to the negotiating parties that Ghana is serious at having a program. Charles Edubuahi should follow in tow. The Ministry of Finance at this moment in time need a complete upgrade from the people who are currently sitting there in order that we have credible leadership to engage the IMF and come up with a program that is a workable program. Unfortunately, he is the same man who the president has directed to engage the IMF. To go and say what? That we are no more a sovereign country? That we are no more a proud nation? That the people who said they should go to IMF are now not naysayers, but he's now the naysayers because he has come?
But I can tell you, as my colleague, Deputy Minister said, we are not going to the IMF. Whatever we do, we are not. The consequences are dire. We are a proud nation. We have the resources. We have the capacity.
But if I hear some people argue that we should go to IMF, any government that goes to IMF has failed. And we haven't failed for the good works that we have done in this country. You should applaud Ken Ofori-Atta. He's not well, but still, yesterday I heard them in war. All in the name of the country. Please.
That's a fair point. With that, wouldn't you probably credit the administration to take a decision to go to IMF? Administration now already money card pay now or the money koja IMF no. So what should we credit him with? Already money card pay now if you're the IMF no. Well, that is what mood is. But why do you have to, in the first place, who bury them in the manaka don't pay now? If you are okay, but me and I don't pay me, don't call IMF, into clap for me for taking you to the IMF. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Why would you take us to that point in the first place?
To keep the country going, had to incur additional expenditures for the free water, the free electricity, the provision of free food. These were unavoidable expenses that government had to make. So the gap, the fiscal impact of what we had to do is being considerable. These are the efforts that we are now making, which are being resisted by the opposition to us, to try and close the gap. It's necessary for us to do so because that is the only way in which some of these matters can be addressed.
The circumstances in which we found ourselves were very difficult. You know, low or stunted growth, high inflation, high debt, all the indicators of an economy that is in severe distress were apparent at that time. But the point is that we did something which probably we've not explained quite, I would say, eloquently to people. We were in an IMF program when we took over. We decided that we had no choice but to complete the program. But once we took the decision to complete, our strategic objective was to exit. Because again, there's no evidence where the IMF itself, by its program, can create prosperity for you. So IMF comes in purely for stabilization, for balance of payment support and liquidity support. So whilst we agreed to remain with the program, we tried to work ourselves out of the program. And that's what we did. So again, the evidence is that within 2 years, we're able to meet all the conditionalities and the requirements for the program. And we're able to exit with our chest out. I remember Madame Christine Lagarde, very uncharacteristic of the World Central Bank, IMF, you know, the World Bank, the IMF is the World Central Bank. She actually was praising us when we were exiting. But I'm making this point because whilst we agreed and decided that we would keep to the program through fiscal consolidation and prudent expenditure management and control, we decided also at the same time to embark on an aggressive transformation program. And it's important that we understand that. Whilst we were ensuring that we achieve fiscal consolidation with the IMF program, at the same time, and it needed a lot of courage, that whilst you are doing that, you at the same time decide to embark on a transformation program. Because if the transformation does not occur, you go back to IMF. You come back to square one. And to get into the substance of a transformation program, it requires a lot of money. There is no way you can achieve transformation without resources. And that was one of the main reasons why we had no choice but still to borrow to fund the transformation agenda that we were pursuing in parallel. And so it's clear. Agricultural transformation, planting for food and jobs, planting for export and rural development. If you come to industrial transformation, a very comprehensive program, 10-point agenda for transformation. Maybe we won't have the time to talk about it. Maybe during question time, we can get into it. But the content of our industrial transformation is so comprehensive that it is an entry point for those of you in the private sector to use that as the basis for diversifying.
Right, so that's the videos we have, which was ended by the Venerable Minister of Trade and Industry, Honorable Alan Kojo Chematin. And I honestly was expecting to hear him talk about the mobile money and the conversations that had gone around it. Let me come back to you, Emmanuel. Were you expecting anything about the mobile money, or you've seen all the videos now? I mean, let's take it from there now.
For the e-levy performance?
For the e-levy, yeah.
Yes, of course. The information we have now is that the e-levy is not performing as it ought to. And in the 2022 budget, that was one of our key revenue lines. We had projected about close to 7 billion. It was then revised to about 4 billion. But we realized that for a month of implementation, the e-levy is not raking in the lot of revenue that as we envisaged. And so there is a lacuna there. It has to be met, hence going for these kind of programs.
But did government not anticipate that the e-levy will face that kind of challenges? I mean, the conversation had been very strong on e-levy against IMF. We have done the e-levy, and here we are now going to IMF.
Yeah, government was very optimistic about that revenue line. But some of the arguments some of us made at the time, if you are going into a sector that you have not touched before, why don't you go progressively? Let's say the rate starting from 0.5%, so that gradually, year on year, you'll be able to increase the rate. But at 1.5%, a lot of people are not doing mobile money transactions. And research by institutions have shown that the volumes of transactions has really dropped. And you can even confirm that from a simple poll by those who are watching us. And so they were very optimistic that the e-levy was going to rake in a lot of revenue. In the 2022 budget, government had earmarked to raise about 100 billion. At the same time, expenditure was around 137. Then straight away, we have a budget deficit of 37 billion.
But that's always happening every year. And
yes.
What amazes me is how government is not able to position itself in a way that will be able to overcome the budget deficit that we have every year. At least have a reducing effect every year to the point where we'll break even and begin
and
to
even more importantly, the Fiscal Responsibility Act tells you to do 5% of your GDP. So government is very clear in their mind, even backed by law. But successive governments have not been able to solve the bigger problem. What is the bigger problem of the Ghanaian economy? You are not raising a lot of revenues. Tax to GDP ratio is around 12%. As compared to lower middle income countries like ours, they are doing above 18 and 20%. And so that is a big challenge. At the same time, expenditure is ballooning. And it might surprise you to know that for second year running, interest payment has overtaken compensation to government employees. That is very alarming.
Really?
Because
I haven't really checked that.
Yes, for
interest
second
payment.
year. Yes,
has exceeded emoluments.
Yes, for this year's budget, it was 37 billion. As against compensation, 35 billion. And the same applied to, in that ratio for the last fiscal year. And so it's challenging. Government has to cough in a lot of money to amortize those maturing debt and all that. So how do we get out of this quagmire? We get out by looking at the revenue measures that can rake in, at least in the fiscal year, raising some level of revenue. And at the same time, you cut down on some of the expenditure items. And so government was clear in their mind in their March presentation to cut down on some of the expenditure items. We don't know the performance yet. But the bigger problem is for us to solve the low revenues that we have in our country so that our revenues will be able to, if not cater for the entire expenditure, the value of deficit will reduce, which will also affect your public debt. And so once your budget deficit is huge, it means that it's going to also affect your public debt. That is why we see public debt hitting almost 400 billion Ghana cedis. And as compared to GDP, close to 80% of our GDP. It's quite worrying, the situation we find ourselves in.
This one says, great show and great submissions. I told you earlier on that today I'm going to read a lot of messages. So if you do send them, I'll make sure I read. I have a plethora of questions here, but we want it to be very conversational. And we know that the negotiations have begun. So all the questions that will now begin, whether we need to go or not to go, I want to rather engage the views that we have. Someone says, great show and great submission. Mr. Amoah-Darkwa from the YPG and YEF members, Hacho Cavalry. Well, Felix, what it says, IMF is not a bad move, but the conditions attached. Felix, what it sent in that one. Okay, these are not... Chris Arthur says, please extend my greeting. Well, this is a business show. Greetings to GFK. Well, fair enough, but this is a business show. Let's please concentrate on the topic, the IMF. I am Eric Opoku Abraham from Kintampo, watching this program live. If I may ask, how come we got to this far? Did we deserve this? Our only crimes we committed is to become Ghanaians. I think the IMF shouldn't give us the money directly. They must supervise the utility of the funds. Isaac or Opoku Eric Abraham sent in that one. Exactly how much did the Mahama government borrow that the Akufo-Addo government to go on a borrowing binge? The huge borrowings of the NPP government cannot be the excuse for these wanton borrowings. TJ in Koforidua sent in that one. All right. Okay, I've read this already, but let me come back to my questioning. Are we headed for a doom? When I posted the poster today, that is the question somebody said I should ask.
No, I won't.
Looking at the current economic hardships, looking at the fuel price increases.
Yeah. I won't say we are in a doom, but it's...
But are we headed for a doom?
We are not headed for a doom. That is why government is exploring a couple of options. But the bigger question is, what could we have done differently in the past? Let's say 3 years, 4 years ago. And I come back to the point again. The structure of Ghana's economy, it has to be changed. And I link the whole IMF discussion to, let's say, going to the doctor and you have malaria. Malaria, you might pull some symptoms of headache. If you treat the headache and you don't treat the malaria itself, then we have some more symptoms of malaria. And so this is one of our challenges we are facing as a country. We are having budget balance of payment deficit. And hence, government wants to shore up reserves and get cushioning for balance of payment. But what happens next after an IMF program? It might interest you to know that we have been doing this for the past 17 times. If we are successful with these negotiations, it's going to be 18 times. The question is, what could we have done differently since independence?
And you talk about the structure.
That's the structure. We start from a revenue side. We talk about expenditure. The third thing is that the economy is very import dependent, and it also affects your balance of payment.
But this government came into power promising that we are going to move from taxation to productivity.
Yes.
And of course, that is an exact change of the structure that we are all expecting.
Yeah,
it hasn't been able to do that.
At least not been able to achieve in full, but that is a good attempt. For example, government says that we're going to have one district, one factory. One of the key objectives is for us to have import substitution industrialization. But the current political cycle we run, 4-year, 8-year, are we going to get the full benefit of such an industrialization policy, which is going to show up our reserves and going to also cushion our balance of payment? And those are the structural problems that I believe that government or successive governments will be committed to solving. Either than that, the government presents a manifesto, they come into government, they apply budget to it, and they run into problems in their second term. That is why for every 4.5 years, and that is what the data shows, that we've been going for IMF programs. So it tells you that the structure of Ghana's economy must change. And more significantly, when there is an external shock, then we see that the government or the economy is in shambles. And as we can see, the two external shocks we are talking about.
Yes, but just before you mention the two external shocks, I know you want to be talking about the Russia-Ukraine war and then COVID, or is that the case?
Oh, not really, but I want to make the point that these problems get exacerbated by external shocks, and it affects Ghana's economy. And so in 2014, I listened to some of the sound bites you played, and it's not entirely true for some of the MPP communicators or ministers to say that for the NDC program, it was self-induced. It is not entirely true because at the time they also had challenges with revenue.
Yeah, it was a question I was going to come to. I mean, the differences between the previous IMFs and the current
crude oil prices at the time, the budget has pegged barrel to about $90. But crude oil prices went down below $40. So the minister then had to come to Parliament to present a revised revenue, target. Again, there was energy crisis. Energy crisis, a part of it was the challenges with the gas flow from the West Africa gas pipeline. It wasn't even caused by the Ghanaian government, but it was external. And also, gold prices and cocoa prices were plummeting at the time.
There were times that we had the turret bearing problem of FPSO and so on.
That's the thing. So those were also external and then internal shocks. But the point I want to make is that because of the structure of the economy, it gets exacerbated when there are external shock. Hence, we go to the IMF for funded programs.
Beyond the structure of the economy, I mean, we are in a decline. So to speak. So the first or the basic point is the structure of the economy, which obviously needs to be attended to, which hasn't been done by several governments, not the NPP currently, not the NDC just previously, but several governments transcending time. What should we have done, or what could we have done within the recent past, apart from the structure of the economy? I mean, we have talked about moving from taxation to productivity. We have talked about MPP putting in structures like the 1D, 1F, and so on and so forth. But our current problem, we are basing it on COVID and basing it on Ukraine-Russia war. Others think that there is a problem, for example, of mismanagement, economic mismanagement, and that figures showed before the COVID that we were not in the state that government or some people had made us believe.
Well, even before the 2020 elections, we did some work for CDD at the time and wanted to assess the manifesto of MPP and NDC at the time. Looking at the manifestos they have presented, well, the current fiscal space allowed them to implement those manifesto promises. And it was clear that the current fiscal space was not going to allow us to implement those, manifesto promises for both parties. And so what can be done? That is where we should look at the alternative ways of raising revenue and also looking at some legislation. For example, tax exemption bill has been in Parliament for about 3-4 years now. But we know we are losing a lot of money. We don't have a lot of money. But with the little that we have, we're also throwing it away, quote and unquote. And I'm not anti-foreign direct investment. But the point I want to make is that we have to look at how best in this dire situation, wherever we can get monies, we have to look at that and get the monies. In terms of tax compliance, what is the volume of tax compliance we have in the country? These are all things that we have to look at so that the little revenues we could have gotten from other, sectors, and we should have gotten it. And then also, state-owned enterprises. Look at the volumes of losses they pose every year. Why is that the case? Because if you look at government revenues, there are 3 key components of government revenue in the budget. You have tax revenue, you have non-tax revenues, and you have grants. Grants, as a lower middle income country, you are not going to get a lot of grants from your development partners, but you have control over tax revenue and to a large extent to non-tax revenue. What are the reforms that you are doing in your state-owned enterprise so that they post profit and pay dividends to government? And these are all things that, as a government, you should be able to look at so that we'll be able to cut down or get a lot of revenue. At the same time, looking at the other side, the expenditure bit. How do we cut down on corruption? How do you cut down on procurement breaches? I believe that it's about time that we treat corruption and then procurement breaches as proper economic policies, because we are losing a lot. Year in, year out, the Auditor General will present Auditor General's report. And look at how much we are losing through that.
Through procurement, through corruption.
We should make it an economic policy. And that is where we will be able to rake in some monies and develop our economy.
Someone says, I should ask you whether you think that e-levy has squeezed the economy and it's also made flow of it difficult. I think...
These are early days, yes. These are early days, yes. I believe that going forward, indeed, the volumes of transactions have gone up, have gone down. But we are yet to measure the impact of the volumes of transaction on general economic activities. Then we'll be able to say that e-levy, because of the volumes of transaction, economic activities have gone down. And these are early days for us to make such a conclusion.
So this one says, among the sound bites and reels, Mr. Chematin was the only one whose utterance can be justified. I wish the team well in the negotiation process with the object of Ghana first. But you did not add your name to it. I'm Kobe from Kufuoredua, great show. So does this mean that the payment of the e-levy is not necessary anymore because that was the main source to generate revenue? But it's clear it can't solve the problems of the country, and hence the IMF move. Eric Opoku-Abraham. Eric Opoku-Abraham, your message has been read already. So much tax leakages through tax exemption. Well, he just mentioned that as well. And one would wonder why the tax exemption bill is a mirage on the clerk's table in Parliament. My name is Yaya Faisal. Good evening. Please, will this incompetent government repeal the e-levy after sending us to the IMF? We'll have to ask government this particular question. Please, my name is Bright from Achuma, Krupon Town. I'm a worker from Youth Afforestry Commendation. I'm sure you want to write. For the past 6 months, no payment. Why? We'll have to ask the Forestry Commission on this one as well. So, can the current administration explain to us what they meant when they brought the agenda of Ghana beyond aid? Were the government not aware of this huge public debt when he increased the salary of Article 71 office holders by such a huge margin? Are they telling us that now going to IMF is the best option to save Ghana's dying economy? Please do add your name when you send the messages on WhatsApp. And good evening, I'm watching you live from Setri, also in the Western North region, Ghana. Wow. Ghana returning to IMF is not bad, but the conditions attached to the loan. Hi, my name is Dude Saganma. I want to ask the NPP and Ken Ofori-Atta that where is the resources they claim they have and will not go to the IMF and finally landed to IMF? What has come of their competent economic management team they claim they have? For I pray the IMF don't grant them the bailout. Why will you pray that the IMF will not grant government the bailout? There are some questions that have come up. For example, whether the e-levy will be scrapped if we go to IMF, and whether IMF is a panacea to our problems currently.
At least to solve a symptom of the economy, but not to cure the sickness entirely. That is what the IMF program is going to do for us. And the evidence is clear that anytime we have gone for an IMF program, yes, we perform on the balance of payment side, and the macroeconomic indicators return to positives, and then there are some, legal regimes that are promulgated for sound economic management, and so we expect that that is going to happen. But the structure has to change, and it should transcend the 4-year, 8-year political cycle we have for us to totally transform our economy.
Somebody says that he believes, for example, the current problems we are in are caused by, well, apart from COVID and apart from the Ukraine war, the collapse of the banks and the non-payment of local contractors is a problem for the current hardships we are facing now.
Well, no, I don't believe so. Because we had spent about 21 billion Ghana cedis. Of course, if that money was available, it can be pumped into other sectors of the economy, I admit. But the consequences of a collapsing financial institutions could have also been dire for the economy. Maybe the approach of the Bank of Ghana, we can debate that at a later date. But I believe that we cannot squarely blame, these two causes for the current challenges we have now.
Well, let me go back to the messages. I'm getting too many of them, and today I've promised to read as many as I can.
Sure.
Let me start from Lamota of Etimetim. You say, if we import onion, pepper, tomatoes, corn, etc. to Ghana, how can our economy be good? And as a farmer, what is going on to the mind of our agriculture minister, who is a medical doctor from Lamota of Etimetim? I still don't understand why the road tolls was removed while revenue is needed. You didn't add your name. Kindly do add your name. We were looking good in 2017 and 2018 when IMF was with us, and after they left, we started falling down. Gideon from Kutubabi. E-levy's projection of 4 billion cedis cannot be realized Indeed, as passed and effected in May, its collection for that month was about 57 million out of the projected 600 million. With this pattern and the conscious evasion of prospective taxpayers, we may be doing less than 10% of the cumulative target by the end of the 2022 fiscal year. I would like to know what informed Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to declare Ghana is not going to IMF and what has changed now. He needs to be fired immediately from Achu Doku from Achimota in Accra. And someone had sent in on certain WhatsApp platforms this earlier that the finance minister is a poor manager of the economy and he should be sacked. Let me put that to you.
Sometimes I shy away from answering such questions, but if you sack him, what
this has come from the main opposition leader who has been a president of the country, and we can say he has some level of experience. He also says that finance minister should be sacked.
Yeah, we should realize that he is a finance minister for the government. And so all government policies that are made, it is not his personal policies, but he funds those policies because of his position as a finance minister. Of course, there are some policy options that we can debate about. But I believe that when he goes to cabinet, his ideas it is not the supreme. It is being debated. And so whatever he does, it is the position of the government.
He determines who to pay and who not to pay. But the issue has been rife about him taking a leave and allowing other people to come in with new ideas, fresh ideas. You don't think so?
Well, and then let's say, for me, I would go for a total reshuffle of government. Fresh ideas. For me, not only the finance minister.
And you are of the school of the thought that the president has delayed too much in reshuffling his government.
Sometimes it is necessary. But I don't know what is informing his decision to keep some of the ministers.
For 6 years, some people have been very comfortable in their positions.
That is the thing. But
and have become arrogant in their positions.
That is the thing. Even in a football match, you sometimes have to change some of the players for them to know that, yes, indeed, they don't own the team. And so I believe that maybe this is a time for him to do a shake-up in his government. But the fundamental problems, whether a shake-up or no shake-up, must be solved. And I have said on so many platforms that even when we bring the World Bank chief economist to manage Ghana's economy, without addressing the problems, the structural, fundamental problems of the economy, he will fail or she will fail. It means that there are structures that goes beyond personalities. Of course, government comes in with policies to solve these structural challenges.
Let me go back again, and we have a few minutes to end the program. So let me be able to, I'll still come back to you. Good evening, I'm Kwaku Versatile from Kumasi, Ghana, a poor country, yet still we and our leaders do as if we are billions. Why all ministers, MPs, public CEOs uses V8 with free fuel coupons? Can you imagine if we cut all these and go in for less expensive cars with lower fuel consumption, we would have saved huge sums of monies. Outside gentility, whom cry. Kwaku Versatile sent in that one. Hello, my name is Yusuf from Bechim. Do we need the country's development and stable economy or politicize these IMF issues? I suggest we should change our way of thinking and deal with the growth of our country. That's about the structure as well. Hi, I am Jamal from Kumasi. Please ask him when they said they have the men to run the economy. Now that we are going back to IMF, what are the conditionalities? And I will ask him that. What are the possible conditionalities that will come if we are able to have a deal with the IMF in this time that Ghana is going to them? What are the conditionalities? Some people have thought that if we do go, we may have to scrap the free SHS, for example. I will ask our guest tonight whether he thinks same. The government doesn't listen. This administration is full of ego and can go to the extreme to victimize anyone that genuinely criticizes its rule. The whole TUC, Trade Union Congress, is afraid to demonstrate in this era. CEOs are enjoying and ordinary workers are suffering. No name, I am afraid to lose my job. You won't add your name because you are afraid to lose your job. I still don't understand why the road tolls, okay, this has been taken already. And we want Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia to speak on the current situation in Ghana from Abdul Kadri Tutingli. I hope I got that name right. We are going to IMF. The government should stop carrying his chair with, okay, that's very political. And my name is Joseph Apia Boaten. Look, the managers of our country have failed already. Joseph was a stranger in the land of Egypt, but was able to bring ideas that save Egypt at the time of crisis. As an MPP person and a pastor, the downfall of the Akufo-Addo government is putting his brother there. Period. They have failed us. Shameful. Let me come to you now. The conditionalities and whether you think free SHS will be scrapped if we go through.
Well, definitely some of the policies would have to be reviewed. From our recent past experience between 2015 and 2019, when we were on the Extended Credit Facility Program, there was a net freeze of public sector employment. And then there was also some level of cut in social interventions. And so we expect that based on the past experience, there's going to be a review or a revision of some of the policies that we are currently running. But in the 60s and the 70s, what the IMF was doing is that they present a policy to you, and that is what you have to implement. But for now, countries have the opportunity to bring to get on the table a policy for negotiations, because the IMF will also have to be confident about when they are giving you the money, you should be able to pay in the near future. And so hence conditionalities. When Honorable Adongo was speaking, he mentioned that they had the Senchi consensus and then the homegrown policies they presented to the fund. I've also heard the Minister for Information mention that they also have an enhanced economic program. And so I believe that it's going to be presented to the fund. This is the grand plan of the government. But what can be done? What can be removed? What can be removed, be reviewed, and what can be scrapped? All these things are going to come under a negotiation. But I believe that maybe free SHS will be reviewed. And not only free SHS, some of the flagship programs. Oh, reviewed, but I don't believe it's going to be scrapped, but maybe reviewed. Well, and not only that, but the flagship programs as well.
Right, so Chris Arthur again says the difference is clear. NDC went to the IMF for policy credibility due to mismanagement. MPP is going to the IMF because of global and external effects beyond our control. Almost 20 or more countries across the globe are heading to IMF for same reasons. Greetings to JFK, Chris Arthur. Well, okay. I think I should end here. So a very big thank you to you, Emmanuel Amoah-Darkwa, for
Amoah-Darkwa.
Amoah-Darkwa.
Yeah.
For helping us tonight. Emmanuel Amoah-Darkwa is an economic expert and partner at CCAT Global. Thank you very much for doing the watching and sending us your messages as well. If you have other concerns, you can still tweet at me at Kwesi Efree on Twitter, or you can follow me on Instagram or on Facebook with your concerns. We'll gather them together and come back with them next week. It's been a good show. Good evening. Thanks for watching.